Okay, we'll call to order City of Gig Harbor's Design Review Board meeting for January 26, 2023. We'll start with a roll call. We'll start with our DRB members. I'll go ahead and call your name since I'm in attendance, and then you can just say here. How about that? Guy.
Here.
And Larry.
Here.
On.
Here.
Anna.
Here.
Brianne? Yes. And Darren Filan, and then staff.
Jeremy Hammer, Associate Planner, City of Gig Harbor.
Cindy Andrews, Planning Technician, City of Gig Harbor.
Robin Bolster Grant, Principal Planner.
Excellent. Okay. Okay, we just have one item on the agenda tonight. I presume, Cindy, we don't have any minutes to approve. I didn't see anything in
No,
our.
I will get
attachment.
those for the next one, sorry.
Okay, fantastic. So we have a single family residence tonight for Jocelyn DeVita. I'll skip over all the details of that. It's located at 3824 Harborview Drive. And so we'll go ahead and move on to open public meeting announcement. So this is an open public meeting, and we do accept public comment, and we'll have an opportunity for that after the applicants have made their presentation, and we've had city staff give their staff report, and then we'll have, if there are any members here in the public that want to make comment, there'll be an opportunity for that. Okay, so appearance of fairness issues. So we usually start off in asking the DRB members if they've had any ex parte communication regarding this application that would preclude them from discussing or voting on this application. So you can give me a head shake if you want to. Okay. All right. So all no's on that. And then I'd ask any member of the audience or the applicant if they have any reason to recuse any DRB member or have any concern with anybody participating, the city staff or the DRB. Anyone? Okay, so we got those out of the way. So we'll go ahead and turn it over to staff. Jeremy Hammer for his staff report.
Thank you. Good evening, DRB. We're here tonight for your consideration of a proposal titled DeVita Single Family Residence, file number PLDR 200042, for a single family residential development on a vacant 0.51 acre lot. And so there's a correction from the public notice that was put out. The square footage of the proposed home is roughly 2,600 square feet, rather than the 4,589 that was listed on the notice. The site is located at 3824 Harborview Drive on the southwestern side of Harborview Drive, approximately 350 feet north of the roundabout intersection of Harborview and Stinson Avenue. The subject parcel is located within the city's R1 single family zoning district and historic district, and is surrounded on adjacent sides by R1 single family residential to the south and west, and WC waterfront commercial to the north and east of the site on the other side of Harborview Drive. The site slopes up sharply from Harborview Drive at an average grade of 30% across the site, with a total elevation change of roughly 90 feet. The site is presently largely covered with invasive vegetation. Tonight's meeting has been appropriately noticed to the public. One comment was provided in response to the notice. That comment was related to slope stability and landscaping. The following questions. One, please explain slope stability mitigation during construction phase. Two, address the permanent slope design and mitigation after construction is completed. And a third question related to the landscaping plan. A copy of the landscaping plan was provided to the commenter via email. The applicant is requesting a design review exception per Gig Harbor Municipal Code 17.98060, requesting relief from the following specific requirements from the design manual. That is 1799-240C, actually topography, which reads, buildings and parking lots shall be designed to fit natural slopes rather than regrading the slope to fit a particular building or parking lot design. Cuts and fills on site shall be balanced, and finished grades shall not include any retaining walls that exceed 6 feet. Instead, design shall complement and take advantage of natural topography. Slope lots may require multi-level buildings, terrace parking lots, and or lower level parking garages. Second exception is 1799-370A, respect natural topography, which reads, buildings shall be designed to fit natural slopes rather than regrading the slope to fit a particular building design, minimize cuts and fills. By developing designs which complement and take advantage of natural topography, slope lots may require terrace parking lots and multi-level buildings designed to follow the slope. An additional section related to the location of the front entry was initially included in the proposed exception. However, after receiving additional documentation from the applicant provided as exhibits E and F to the staff report, it was determined that the proposal meets the requirement prescriptively. This determination is detailed further in the staff report under additional design discussion. The applicant has noted in the submitted narrative that indicates they indicate that special circumstances exist, subject lot that necessitate the need for the exception, and the citing of the proposed home and associated improvements is a result of functional consideration and best practices applied by the civil engineer and geologist. Further discussion of these design considerations and how they will be applied will be followed by the or will be provided by the applicants to follow. So for the DRB, discussion of the project should be limited to the requested design exceptions and the criteria for approval as listed in Gig Harbor Municipal Code section 1798-060D. Would you like me to provide those? I noticed there's forms going around that have those criteria listed.
I don't know if we necessarily need to read them over, but the applicant had provided some copies of those.
Okay, and they're listed in the staff report as well.
Yeah.
So, based on the analysis provided in the staff report, staff and the applicants provide documentation. Staff has found the applicant's request to be consistent with the criteria previously mentioned. Mentioned in that code section we just discussed. And it meets that criteria to be met for the approval of design exceptions. Additional design elements were reviewed by staff and determined to meet the design standards prescriptively and thus may be approved administratively. Should the board agree with the analysis described in section 6 of the staff report, the board may provide a recommendation this evening of approval of the requested design exceptions. This concludes my synopsis of the DaVita single family residence design review, and I'm happy to address any questions prior to the applicant's presentation.
Thanks, Chair. All right, so I'd ask any board members if you have any questions of staff in the application.
Yeah, I got a couple questions here. If I mean, when I look at the architectural plan for the project, the north and south elevations seem to be almost a textbook example of what on page 218 and 192 of what's unacceptable for building on a slope. And I sort of understand the functional considerations, but my question would be, you know, do the functional considerations just apply to this design submitted, or would there be any sort of effort to adhere to these slope conditions through another design or other mitigating architectural actions? And my second question is regarding the retaining wall and the 6-foot height. It seems like the cumulative effect of the two retaining walls are roughly 15 feet. And, you know, I don't know, you know, certainly they're not stacked in one 15-foot level, but they're 4 feet apart, 4.5 feet apart. So I'm just wondering if there's any accounting for that anyway. I didn't see anything in the design review manual, but it seems like an effective 15-foot wall.
Yeah, so I think previously the way that's been applied is it's, I think the board has approved designs that had walls broken apart in this manner. I know there's one recently where We did something like that. But I think it might be a question better suited for after the applicant's presentation, so we kind of get all our information and justification for this, and then we can kind of go back and revisit those questions. If that's all right.
Sounds good.
Thanks, Guy. Okay, if we don't have any other questions from the DRB, we'll go ahead and ask the applicant to make your presentation, introduce yourself and your team, and then the floor is yours.
I'm David Freeman, I'm an architect. Jocelyn DeVita, my client. We've got Keith Shims, this Geo Resources, and Mike. I can't pronounce that last name.
Mike Velarde.
With Contour Engineering. They will both speak to their approach to this problem solving that we've been doing for over a year. If you are familiar with that site, or if you're not, that is what it may look like if you drive by today, except the blue sky is there. But that's a field of blackberries on a site that gains approximately 45 vertical feet over 100 and 130 or something. So it's got a pretty good slope to it. From my research, historically, this site there's been 2 previous attempts to design and build permit a house or houses on this site. The last one divided it into 2 separate plots and 2 separate single family residences, and how the heck would you get up that driveway? So I don't know what else prevented them from moving forward with it, but that's the history until Jocelyn came along. She bought the lot, and when I heard about this lot, I thought, oh boy, this is a tough one. And it has proven to be a little difficult, yes, but I think what we've achieved with the driveway approach to this residence, it's siting on the site here in order to gain the optimum sort of perfect location for this structure. I think we've achieved that. It has 2 stories, just a little over 2,000, or yeah, a little over 2,600 square feet. Built, there's elevations of it. And there is a full site plan that shows what's going on there. The driveway approach had to be done in such a way that EVA could access it. So that's why we have the length we do. Plus we have a turnaround. So we're meeting all criteria in terms of emergency access. One of the things I want to point out and I brought a board along because it's hanging around the office and it seemed like it was the perfect one to show you. It indicates, here's the site. This red line across here is in fact this section down below here. And you can see where the existing grade is dashed in and that is proposed. We minimized as much as possible any portion of the building being built or designed in such a way that it would go further back into the slope. We masked everything in a horizontal dimension. In terms of trying to mitigate this situation with not changing the grades and not exporting, we are proposing to distribute about 1,000 cubic yards over the site. That is the site that is owned outright by Jocelyn. As you can see here, well, it really doesn't show it up there, but the city's property intrudes significantly into the site, as you can see for this aerial photograph. So we're going to spread that 1,000 cubic yards about between 8 and 10 inches around the site. It'll be the sort of the base for then an additional topsoil base for our landscaping, which will be primarily a grass, not your green grass that you know, but a different kind of landscaping. So that, from my standpoint, is where we were, what we tried to do with this, and coming up with the best possible result. And getting down to this decision tonight, I walked through the decision for the exceptions provision and the criteria for approval. There are 6 criteria, and if you've got the chance to read through that, I don't need to read the whole thing, but I can tell you that, in my opinion, this particular house, this design, and that site are all characteristic of what is criteria for approval. I firmly believe that. The design process was, well, difficult in respect to finding the optimum retaining wall system that we could use on that site. So it wasn't just a large wall, it was a stepped sequence of things. And so tonight, what I have, we have 2 engineers with us, and I would ask them one at a time to make a brief presentation of how we went about achieving what we've got here today. We'll start with Keith Shems from Geo Resources. Keith, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Keith Shems. I'm with Geo Resources, with Geotechnical Engineers. We've actually worked on this site for the previous owner as well, when they were looking at doing the short plan of the 2 houses. So we've been involved with the property for quite a while. We had done a bunch of explorations down in the lower portion where the house and the driveway are proposed as part of our original studies. During the development of how to make the best cuts and stabilize the hillside, we were able to get access to one of the upland properties above the DeVita property and do a deeper boring. So we were able to characterize the slope above the house as well. We looked at terracing the slope between the house and the properties up above it, using the requirements of the 6-foot retaining wall system. And because of the steepness of that slope and the height, we'd probably be looking at one location. We had up to 5 different walls in there, so you have a significant more impact on the slope up above it. A lot more cutting of material and being able to get the walls built. So it would have been a lot more disturbance. We also had to look at how construction of the foundation for the house would come into play, because as the house steps down, your foundation members get excavated in the hillside. So you had to worry about temporary cut slope requirements for both the city and for labor and industries, how those would be made, and the constructability of the site. We worked with Contour Engineering, who was doing the layout for the road, had to maintain the slopes for the driveway, the turnaround areas. And that posed another question of how just get the walls in there. So the system we came up with is a 2-tiered wall system. If I recall right, the lower wall is going to be a driven soldier pile wall, so we'll minimize excavation behind the wall, so we won't be cutting into the hill as much. It's a top-down construction, so as they drive the piles, they'll be able to excavate and make that down, so they're not opening up more hillside than they need to. So during construction, it creates a safer build. The wall above it will be a rockery or block type wall that will be able to be built from excavation material, excavators working above it. So just try to minimize how the construction would go on that one. We did slope stability modeling that's required by the city code. It's in our report. We looked at the current condition, undeveloped condition. We looked at the during construction condition with temporary cut slopes. And we looked at the post-construction development with the walls and the drainage systems for the house in there on how that would play. And the resultant factors of safety for the site is a more stable configuration than in the current condition.
Thank you, Keith. Mike? Any things to add to that?
Yeah, so I think David touched on most of the points, but. When you go to look at the setbacks for the house, it does create a triangle, which is not, it's not ideal for buildings, it's most things are square. And when you go to look at the setbacks, building setbacks for where you can actually put the house, you don't really have a whole lot of options, so. We're left with kind of one spot to place the house, and that house with existing grades is, I'm not sure what the height is off the top of my head, but it's at least 15 feet higher than the road, so. The road can only go up so steep, so we're minimizing slope for vehicle access. But at the same time, we're also cutting, we're having to create a cut scenario. And that's why that wall is there at the back of the site. There's also a site distance condition or problem where the existing driveway is with the curvature of the road. So there's also additional cut coming out of that area. But given all of our constraints, we're trying to minimize wall heights and cut material and export as much as possible. So there's also limits on where that house can be placed height wise. So there's a lot of different factors that go into it. And from an engineering standpoint, we're trying to minimize as much cut and impact to that hillside as possible. So.
Thank you, Mike. Questions?
Okay. All right, well, I'll go ahead and start, and then I'll defer to my fellow DRB members for questions. So I think a lot of times when we have evaluated retaining walls on properties, whether commercial, residential, more recently, say in the last decade, the premium sites are gone. Right, the more challenging sites are the only things that are really available. So I think that's led us to have a little bit of empathy about how to work with them. And having this terraced approach, I think, is typically what we'd like to see. And obviously that number of 6 foot is a number that the code describes, but we've seen other instances in public works case or, private entities creating walls because particular sites have challenges that exceed that limit. So what we've found is, given the challenges of the lots that are available today that people are working with, if we can mitigate visual sort of impact of, looking at a big bulky wall, whether it's appropriate landscaping, cascading, the material of the walls themselves visually are interesting, and they can start to approach that 6 foot number as close as we can. I think you've explained, I think to me, I understand well as to why you've gone with the 2 wall system as opposed to looking at creating more walls at, say, a 6 foot or just under, just because of the amount of manipulation of the existing grade that's there. So I think I can understand that, I can empathize with that a bit. So my question maybe to start with is, of the walls that extend, say, out around the house that have the potential to be more visible, can your team describe, for our members, what are the sort of grade elevations, top of wall, the mid-level, what's happening even down? So like how much wall are we talking about being exposed? And again, I think it's probably more reasonable to think about the walls as they extend out and become more of a landscaping element. The house, in my opinion, shields a lot of the wall in the house, and in essence is as tall as the structures there that run right behind the house. So maybe we can talk to that a little bit, specifically the numbers. I know everybody usually asks those anyway, so we can see what we're talking about.
Yeah, so as far as numbers go, the highest part of the wall and the tallest part of the wall is going to be on that back behind the house sections. Then as we go around the sides, basically what we're doing is, it's tapering off to match grade. So we don't extend them down any further than we need to. And once you kind of get on the north side where that turnaround is, once you get past that turnaround, that's where grades start to peter off, and it'll look kind of like a wedge almost, where it's matching down to existing grade. So if you think about it, if you're standing down on the road, looking up at the side, it's creating sort of like an amphitheater type scenario, where on the sides, you've got kind of a triangle or a taper down to existing grade. And that's just, if you look on the south side, on the south side of the house, around the house, that's just, once you get past the extent of the house, it's diving down as quick as we can to get back to existing grade.
So I don't know if other DRB members can see me going to the screen.
I can move the cursor to where you're. Well,
I think I can,
Yeah.
I think I can see a 67, is that 67?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Top,
yeah.
57 top, so 10 foot here, right? So, and then I'm trying to track a grade here, so we're 49. That's probably somewhere here, so we're basically talking about, 18 feet high of wall in this corner, and so it's pretty extreme here. And then, is that right? That's what I'm saying, right? 67 to 57 down to 49, right?
67. So
The elevation's about 66, 64, 66.
it's about 15. Bottom is, it's hard to see on the screen, is that 51?
yeah,
Well, maybe 52, I think that died in the back, I can't
Yeah.
quite tell, but let's say for round numbers, maybe it's are these, okay, so that's 50, all right, so let's say 51.
So that corner there,
So you've got a 6 foot wall here, right? And
Yeah.
you're saying this is is this the bottom wall? Which one's the,
both of them.
okay, well,
Yeah.
okay. So this 10 foot drop, I guess what I'm questioning is the height of this wall is pretty well set, right?
Yeah.
Just because you're trying to not disturb this grade as much, correct?
Right.
Okay. All right, so if that condition, I don't know, is that the worst case condition? Again, I'm trying to map this out for our members here, so we kind of visualize this thing.
I think worst case is right above. There's that storm drainage. You keep going over. Yeah, so right in that area is the tallest part of the wall, from what I remember.
and there's 70 feet right about here. I think that's the highest point.
And heading back down to about 58 and some change, so almost maybe just under 12 feet of differential there. So pretty significant. So this piece is pretty significant as it sits over this. And I guess you're climbing here. Is this wall also is climbing, I guess, to a degree, not as much, but
Yeah, so I think if you go to the next, can you go to the next sheet?
Yeah.
So we have that detail right there. The way we've designed it is that if you go to the left side of the page, that one right there. So that first wall we designed so that it's a maximum of 6 feet tall. And then the second tier above it, we've designed where it varies because it's the topography around it is just changing, but max height of that wall is going to be 11 feet.
okay.
So you've got a minimum, or I guess a maximum 6 foot wall and then a max 11 foot wall. So total wall height is a combination of those two.
And then the idea, just so we can visually describe this, if we're trying not to disturb this grade upland, right, and sort of that 30-foot rear setback. If we wanted to minimize this, that means we need to, in essence, raise this wall, right? Or have another one, or start encroaching on the buildable area within the lot. Right? So I think the conversation, maybe speaking to Guy's original comment is like, again, we always kind of balance how much we're impacting the site versus, again, I think, in my opinion, and I will speak for my fellow members, but the house is very modest, in my opinion, is not very big. And so I think if you were to consider 3 walls here and you start to move that, that buildable area, I think it's rendering the site almost unbuildable. You'd have to either have walls down on the lower part, the site. So I guess the question for me, and understanding the problem is how can we mitigate a wall that's 10 feet tall or, or higher, 12 feet tall, that's upland, when you have a wall that's respecting the height for the most part that's down by the house. So we have, one wall that's really exceeding that height limit, but it's doing some other things really well. It's preserving the grade upland. And it's giving you some buildable area, and you've also created a pretty modest footprint. So all those things, I'll stop for a moment and let everybody else kind of chime in. So I guess you guys can, I'll just offer it up to other members. You guys got some comments you want to start firing off, go ahead.
I'll jump in a little bit if you want.
Thanks, John.
So I think one of the biggest questions I have is, we know that the house is up, it looks like what about, I think you said the top of the driveway is 12 or 15 feet off of the primary road. So what would be the view of the walls from Harborview? I think that's a perspective that's kind of hard to see. Do we have vegetation that's blocking access and view from it somewhat? Is there other ways? I mean, really, what is the public going to see? What is the public right away truly when the house is elevated up that high off the primary road? That perspective is kind of missing in my mind's eye. And kind of going with Darren a little bit on the walls. Retaining walls seems like that's really every single meeting that we have is talking about retaining walls. The stepped one could definitely work good when there's vegetation in between, which kind of blends it out. But having an 11-foot wall on the upper section, I think it's going to be hard to kind of blend it, if that makes sense, and make it disappear more. So I kind of think the perspective's missing in this presentation right now. So we kind of know what the public truly is going to see when they're driving down the road and looking at this. The house itself, I mean, truthfully, I think is a very modest house, and the house looks nice and think it ties in. The other question I have on the cut and fill is, what is this going to look like with the neighboring properties? Are we talking it's a humongous scrape out where you're driving around the corner and suddenly there's a big clamshell cut out of the hillside? Or is it going to be blending with the other properties at the same time too, so it's not sticking out from adjacent properties? So those are my questions.
Thanks, John. All right. Guy, Larry, Brianne, any thoughts?
Well, yeah, I agree with the comments just made previously. I mean, even those of us that can think they can see in 3 dimensions pretty well, knowing the site as well as I do, I have a pretty hard time visualizing. I think 6 foot on the sidewalk across the street, a view, an illustrated view of what this would really look like is in order here, because you know how it is. People, you can look at a plan view and you can kind of get a sense of, size and scale, but unless you have an illustration of the finished product and the walls in particular. I mean, I like the house too. It looks fine. I'm a little concerned, and I'm not a geotech guy, but that hill has been known as Clay Hill ever since I was a kid. And I know it's created problems across the street for various projects. So, I might be nervous if, with the retaining walls there. Anyway, I think it would be really valuable from not a bird's eye view, but a 6 foot view from the sidewalk. to have a rendering of what we're looking at in plan view there.
I agree with Guy and the other comments that have been said. The house itself looks fine. But it is hard to visualize the siding. I am not a geotech, but the retaining walls with the house being right up against those walls. If it were my house, I would be a little concerned about that in that particular area. I would also be interested in a visual of seeing both the retaining wall and the extended driveway in terms of how it would appear from that road's eye view. It is a very long driveway cutting clear across the property. I understand that's done for slope and grading, but at the same time, it does create kind of a visual disconnect where we're seeing a good drawing of it so that we could envision its intended final appearance would be helpful.
Yeah, I would echo all of those comments. I think something that's been helpful in looking and trying to interpret what the visual appearance will be of the walls is really helping us with kind of those. What we essentially walk through in the room is the heights of the walls at various points. So we can kind of compare whatever rendering we see with how the heights of those walls do change and taper. I think that would be helpful. Yeah, I think it's going to be visually. It's going to be hard to picture without a rendering. So I guess I would just stick with that and say, I think it's important that we see something that gives us a little bit more indication what it will look like. So that's all I have to add on this particular topic.
Thank you. So
One confirming question, what is the intended size of the house itself? 2,400 or 4,500 square feet?
2,600.
26. Okay, thank you.
Error in
Yeah, there was an error in some of the presentations, so I wanted to confirm that.
So is that the footprint or both levels? So the footprint's even smaller than that.
The footprint's just a little over 1,200, somewhere in there.
Yeah, extremely modest, in my opinion, very modest.
It had to be to get it in there.
Okay, if there are no other questions, I would say that it would be, at this point in time, reading the tea leaves from the members that we couldn't probably vote on this without having some more information. And I hate to, in essence, sort of defer it to a later date, but it sounds like most of the members are in accord with trying to see some visuals, since it's so challenging to interpret this much grade change and what that perspective will be from Harborview. So if I've heard everybody correctly, I think I would make a motion to ask the applicant to consider putting together a series of perspectives from Harborview that describe how the walls would look in combination with the house, and possibly even maybe a year 1, year 2 landscaping plan kind of thrown in there, maybe not fully mature, but in essence, what we could expect to see in that first year or 2 year. And again, we're not looking for, I don't think we've ever seen, realistic, high fidelity type renderings. It can be still a bit, sketchy in nature, but again, accurate enough to convey, what the intent would be. I know we could have used some of those things for some of the other public works projects, and we got those when we asked for them. So I think it'd be helpful. Again, it sounds like there isn't any concern with the proposal or the house as such. It's just really having a better understanding of how these walls are going to look on this hillside. So Are you guys amenable to that request?
I'll be happy to address that with one or more.
Okay,
Perspective sketches that would
okay,
depict what you would see from us, as Guy Hoffman mentioned, from a 6-foot elevation on the sidewalk,
yeah,
either from on the property side, or you can choose if you want to go on the other side, we can do it that way as well, which probably gives you a little more perspective into the site. If you're up close to it, you're not going to see much anyway.
right,
And that's part of our goal, is being able to see very much of any of the walls.
right,
So,
okay.
yes, we can have those ready. I can't give you a date certain, but I can tell you that I can have it rather quickly.
Okay. All right, so I'd ask, I don't know if we have to necessarily vote on it, but the members are in accord with that request of the applicant. You can shake your head if you want to, and we can say we'll send them back to do a little more work. We'd appreciate that.
Yep. Hey, Darren, my only other comment would be both directions on the road.
Okay.
Yeah,
Is,
and I appreciate your calling out the landscaping as a piece of that too. I was looking at the landscaping plan, and I think we would benefit looking at both together as much as we can. I think that'll really help inform what that visual will be. So, yep, I appreciate that.
do we know if the city has ever got plans to put a sidewalk on the opposite side of Harborview?
You don't know.
Okay,
So certainly ask the.
all right, so I guess what we're considering is the sidewalk opposite, since it's the only one that exists right now. Okay, so with that said, I think no more questions from DRB, applicants presented, so if we have any public members and want to make any comment, now's the time, so.
I'd like to know a little bit about the water flow from up above going through this lot.
So let me pause for a second. If you'll state your name and address for the record, would be great.
Okay, John Boyd, 8405 Bay Ridge.
All right, thank you. So yeah, go ahead and ask your question.
I'd just like to know how the water flow is going to go from up above through this lot with the retaining walls. Has that been considered in design?
Well, in regards to our review as the design review board, that would be something that would be a part of engineering and in some sense kind of out of our purview. But since we're here, I can ask Dave and his team if they want to speak to it, would be appreciated.
Yes, I would tell you that there's minimal amount of hard surface on this site as I possibly get. And therefore, the remaining 70% or 80% of it is going to be pervious material, plantings, if you will. And for the most part, we're proposing to use a number of grasses, probably 6 or 7 different varieties, which soak up a lot of water. So that if the site isn't disturbed a lot, and that's where our goal is here, to keep the site as undisturbed as possible. The infiltration will be the benefit of the site. I don't see that as a problem. You keep both of you can comment on that.
So we do have drains, close conveyance pipe, so all the roof drainage from the new house will get picked up and tight lined, routed to the public storm system. So there's no intention to have any surface runoff from any new hard surfaces. Any upland flows that might be coming down the hillside will get picked up by the wall drainage system, which Keith can speak to a little bit more. But we don't anticipate a whole lot coming off the hillside. I know there is seeps coming off that hill. So.
Yeah, each of the walls will have a wall drain behind there. Because of the wall type we use, it'll be a thinner area. And the water will still come down the back of the wall. They'll get picked up with the drain, either right behind the wall or right in the front of the wall, and then connect to the system. So again, all the water will be collected and conveyed out, providing a dry buildable area, a dry permanent house area, a dry slope below, and then taking it down to the system, the city's stream.
Okay, thank you. Does that address your question
So
initially?
what about that's very steep. Yeah, from the walls back to the pavers, extremely steep. So during this construction phase, what is the stability issues of that very steep thing?
Well, again, the type of wall we're proposing is the soldier pile wall. They'll come out there, they'll create a fairly rough level pad, and they'll have to be doing it in the dry season. And then they'll drive piles. As they drive the piles, they start making the excavation and replacing that dirt with wood magnets, a top-down excavation. So they don't make a big temporary cut that stays open for a long time, that's unstable. They're stabilizing the site before they start actually construction of the house. So when it's all done, the wall's there, they're able to build in front of the wall, maintain stability of the hillside, but also provide a stable build in the area.
So the walls going for that.
Correct.
That's good.
Okay. All right, thank you for your question. Okay. Okay, with no other public comment, I think this concludes the application at this point. Okay, so you're clear on stating what we're looking for, some renderings from Harbor View, maybe showing some landscaping, couple different views, encompassing the property, and is accurate for those perspectives and vantage points, maybe some overlays with some photographs and trying to get everything to line up would be, pretty helpful.
I can make that happen.
Great, appreciate that. Okay, anything else? Application.
Nothing from myself. Cindy, do you have anything?
Okay. Okay, so I guess you guys are all excused. I don't know if we have any little housekeeping to do. Talking about next meetings or anything else like that.
We don't have another meeting scheduled. The next one would just be Mr. Finley. Get back to us for the next one on the.
Okay, okay, so one thing in regards to formality of the meeting, can we say this is a continuation? So we don't have to notice. So if
Yes.
Dave gets the renderings done next week, we can put it on the next meeting, right?
Yes.
If you don't have anything, right?
We could continue to a date certain.
Okay, so I would make a motion that we want to continue this meeting to the next regular scheduled DRB meeting. It sounds like the applicant can have information ready to go for that, so we can avoid having to have a new notice. So I have a second.
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 Seconded. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, okay. So this meeting will be continued to the next available meeting, which I think is the next, so fire's lit, so it's inevitably 2
We can
weeks.
get our lunch. Can we get it down?
I can have what you're going to review within that 2-week window.
Okay,
So the next meeting is February 9th.
February 9th.
Would you like to shoot for February 9th, Mr. Freeman?
Fine,
Okay.
I know I can handle that.
Right, we'll put that on for February 9th.
Excellent. Okay. We'll have meeting minutes at that point. Anything else? Sounds like we're going to meet in person now moving forward.
For all the members that want to meet in person, it's still optional, but if
Okay,
you'd like to meet in person, we are here. And we successfully fumbled through this one, so.
Right.
The next one will be a breeze.
well, I would encourage, if it's COVID, that was the obstacle that got in the way of us always meeting in person. So if you can make it, I think it benefit greatly by having everybody in the same room. I think you get a lot more accomplished reading body language.
Yes.
As opposed to just, faces, to a degree. So I think if you can make it, let's make it. And it'd be very helpful. Okay, I think that's it. Anybody want to make a motion to adjourn?
Actually, before we do, Darren, last time, I don't believe we actually formally introduced Guy and welcome to the team. It was kind of a brief.
Not everybody knew Guy. You.
Do now.
Who doesn't know Guy?
Hi.
Okay, I'm sorry. All right, well, welcome again officially, Guy, to the DRB.
Appreciate it.
And Guy, what I think I seem to remember from the last meeting you were interested in historic preservation. That was your seat or your interest in this. Is that the case? Am I remembering that correctly?
I think perhaps, I mean, I think that's where I got placed in a manner, so
I think you're stepping in for Linda's position, I believe.
probably, yeah. Yeah, that would be a good characterization.
Okay, great. Well, it's nice to meet you since I think I'm the only one that hasn't met you yet.
Ditto.
Okay,
Okay,
anything else for the good of the order? All right, I'm gonna make a motion to adjourn. Any seconds?
a second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Hi.
All right, we're so adjourned. Have a good night, everyone. Thank you.
Hi, see ya.
See you next time in person.
Next time in person.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, thank you, everyone. So this,